What's up, guys? Oh man, it's been a long week, and so finally I'm getting around to doing this lecture. And yeah, the time change that definitely messed me up for sure. And so, uh, but like I've been doing, so I had to do a 24 into a 12 into my clinicals, which was from that night till midnight, and then from midnight I got back at like 1 a.m. Because we got a critical patient. Well, she was in SVT, so basically when her heart is like just her heartbeats were really rapid, and she couldn't slow it down, so we had to push medication and make it basically restart. And so yeah, I got home at like 1:30, and then of course the time changes that too. So then of course as soon as I got my stuff ready and everything, and I started to lay down, I figured, oh, I got some time to rest. Nope, it skipped to 3, and then I had to get up like several hours later. So then I had to work all day at the clinicals, and then go down to Cincinnati to where my grandfather is and hang out with him for a little bit too, before coming back up here. Because, well, so here I am, and so yeah, sorry I wasn't able to get to this sooner, and but yeah, now I'm here. But otherwise, yeah, I sent an email while I was at clinicals on detailing kind of like they have a little interactive map that goes over the Operation Barbarossa, and you could kind of click through the days or the years or the months and kind of see how the infantry and how the army kind of moves on both sides. And then I also sent you like a document that about the thesis that I wrote. So the thesis that I wrote, it pertains mostly to World War II, but this it's over the tactics and then kind of like the ideology behind why certain countries perform in the air differently. And so, of course, Germany kind of developed their planes for a much more high altitude warfare and ground attack, of course, versus Japan, which they emphasize more so on carrier aircraft. So that's why most of their aircraft are light. They also, of course, to save on materials and also help with longer range, and so that helped them a lot. And then also with the U.S., they didn't really bank on a a war across the seas like such as that, and so they mostly relied upon more so your coastal defense. So a lot of their bombers were so mid-range. They also had more so your interceptors, so ground to air interceptors and stuff like that. And so of course they had naval planes too and everything, but most of their stuff was made more so just protect the coast and protect the borders around the U.S. And so I kind of go over different ideologies, and then of course fighter pilot training through each one, and kind of how things kind of tipped in the balance of the Allies towards the end of the war, towards mid to the end of the war. So you guys could skim through that if you want to. If you're into battle tactics and stuff like that, then that's definitely a document that I'd suggest looking at. I got some pictures in there too to help you guys out. But otherwise, yeah, no, I just figured I'd throw something out there just to kind of like wet your whistle a little bit before I get into this. But for now, I'm going to go into the European theater. So I'm going to switch over. I'm going to start off pretty much with the Italian and German surrender of North Africa. And so finally, they surrendered in North Africa. 250,000 troops end up surrendering, and so North Africa is now in the possession of the Allies. So now they're going to set up base and start bombing campaigns into. They're just going to start bombing campaigns into the southern part of Italy. So they're going to go from Tunis or Tunisia into, of course, the southern part, what was it, of Sicily to Italy, and then of course into France and Germany. And so that's what I'm going to get into, really. But otherwise, I'm going to actually go back, though. And so I didn't talk about one major campaign, which was the Battle of the Atlantic. So that started actually in 1939, September 3rd, 1939. And when the Athena, the British passenger liner, the Athena, ended up being sunk by a U-boat. And so about 100 people die. Well, I guess if you want to be specific, like 110, 112 people end up dying. And that kind of what kickstarts this war. And so afterwards, it's basically like a full. They the Allies developed this full scale. Well, no, sorry, the Germans end up developing this full scale crossing through the Atlantic, and so by 1940, almost 200 U-boats end up becoming in service, and they start out operating out of all the French ports that they captured in Vichy, France, or Vichy, France. Vichy, I believe it's Vichy, Vichy, France. And so, yeah, by August, basically, the German idea was to sink Allied shipping around the coast. Oh, let me go right here. Yeah, sink Allied shipping around the coast of course, the United Kingdom and Ireland, and basically just starve them. And so, of course, by this time, we had the Lend-Lease program and everything coming out. And so they want to starve Britain of any resources. So then by the time it comes to the Battle of Britain, they're short on resources. They can't really logistically operate. And then that basically the whole country capitulates. That's their idea. Of course, that didn't go that way. So, so the German U-boats, they start developing into these packs. So they got about 10 wolf packs. And so that's what the term, well, wolf packs, well, I don't know the German term for it, but they start operating out of these wolf packs, and so it's about 20 U-boats to a wolf pack. And so they hit major success starting out. And then by the end of October, about 36 ships ended up being sunk. That was actually in one day, though. And so by 41, that's when the U.S. kind of started getting involved. So there was a German U-boat that crossed into the U.S. waters. And so the USS Niblack and the USS Reuben, they ended up engaging that U-boat. And because at the same time, I believe the Dutch freighter, there was a Dutch freighter that ended up being damaged, and so they were trying to salvage or save the passengers on that freighter, but at the same time they were engaging this U-boat. And then of course the U-boat escapes and everything, but that was the first U.S.-German engagement or ship engagement at that time. And so by that spring, like right before the summer, it was about like April, May, I believe it was about May, when I believe U-110, so it was a German U-boat that ended up being captured. And so on board was something specific. It was their code machine, so the Enigma machine. The Enigma machine was specific to Germany, and it helped with sending messages without the Allies understanding what it was. But now that they got the Enigma machine, now the Allies or the U.S. sent it back, and the Allies ended up sending it back, and then they ended up decoding it and figuring out what the codes meant. And so this was a game changer for everyone. And so that was aboard the HMS Bulldog. So that was Britain. So the British ship, HMS Bulldog, ended up taking it and cracking it later and then figuring out the coded messages and everything. So by 42, German U-boats were now up to about 330. 330 of them were now operational, and so by around like from winter to spring, from January to March, about 216 U.S. vessels ended up being sunk off the coast of kind of like the eastern or the east coast of the U.S. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there you go. So hopefully any of you have been to North Carolina. And so off the coast of, I believe it might be the Outer Banks, and just south of there, just along this coast, if you get a map, actually I do have a map. It's going to be downstairs. I can send a picture and put it in the announcement and everything. But off the coast of the Carolinas, that's where you'll actually get a bunch of shipwrecks. And especially a large majority of them are from U-boats, German U-boats that sailed up to the east coast of the United States and started sinking all our shipping. And so, Carolinas got that. So by this time, the U.S. adopts this convoy idea of whenever a ship goes out, they will send an what was it? Not an armored convoy, a military convoy, a naval convoy, out to escort them to their destination in order to protect them from further U-boat attacks. And so, I mean, in hindsight, it kind of worked. But ultimately, it still had its issues. And so by the beginning of the summer, 124 ships ended up being sunk, and about 834,000 tons of material ended up being lost at sea due to those U-boat attacks. And so additionally, about 300 U.S. ships were then attacked subsequently in the Caribbean. And so Allies knew that U-boats were operating in this area. So what they began to do was, instead of just sailing around out here with a convoy, they started sailing through the Bahamas into the Caribbean and around this southern part in order to reach the Allied borders over here. Well, that didn't work. And so the Germans caught wind of that, and so that's when they started operating towards the Caribbean as well. And so about 1,160 total Allied ships were sunk in that entire year of 42. By 43, the U.S. is now not on the defensive. So FDR, he gets tired of it, and he's just like, you know what, screw this, shoot on sight. Let's go belt to you know what. So FDR calls for a shoot on sight, and so for any Axis ships that they see, just shoot them down, just sink them. So then by May they send up aircraft to scout ahead, and the aircraft uses this radar system, I don't know exactly how. I have to look more into the intricacies of the radar system. I don't know if it's more so like a sonar system or if it is actually a radar system, but they use that to detect U-boats. And so then by May of 43, they call this Black May. And so by Black May, about 33 U-boats end up trying to attack an Allied convoy. So this wolf pack was... what was it? Oh yeah, this wolf pack started bouncing them or ambushing them, but then they didn't realize that there was what was it? British B-24 Liberators that came through and started just like laying waste to the sea, just like dropping bombs, and escort carriers or escort destroyers, started coming in, and so they all just ambushed these U-boats. And about 4 managed to get away with 0 Allied losses, which was crazy. So they sunk all, what was it? Oh, gonna make me do math. So 4, 3, 26. So 29. 29 U-boats ended up being sunk, which was insane. So in 1 month, the next month after that, 43 U-boats ended up being sunk, with only about 30 Allied ships being sunk. So it was almost nearly 1-to-1. And so Admiral Karl Donitz, so he's the one that oversaw the whole operation. And so by 43, he realized that he's not making as much progress as he would like. Yeah, sure, there's still sinking ships, but not as much, and he's also losing more and more U-boats. So he decides to call back his U-boats. So by 43, he starts calling them back and be like, you know, it's not worth losing these men. We have other problems to deal with back in Europe. And guess what Hitler says? Hell no. So he wants to send them back. And so by this time, though, it's about 44. By this time, of course, we all know what happens. France is invaded. So, what does that mean? No more French ports, no more U-boat bases. So, that was by June. All the French ports and U-boat bases are now completely obsolete. They can't use them. And so, by April 29th of 45, That's when, of course, Hitler, he signs his will and testament. He marries Eva Braun, and then he names Karl Donitz as the successor or the Reich's president of Germany, or the Third Reich, while Joseph Goebbels, he became chancellor, or he was to become chancellor. But by this time, also, that was it. That was the last of the battle. I believe he tried to send out four more U-boats, but then they ended up being sunk or something, and then that's when the whole operation just kind of went kaput. And so by was it by May 1st of 45, I believe that was the last one. So the last one, Donitz attempts to attack the U.S. one more time. He tries to go on the defensive, especially after Hitler died. So then he sends U-boats out to the Atlantic, and then about four of them are sunk, like I said, and then that's pretty much the end of the operations. And that was pretty much the end of the Third Reich, essentially. So then, but now, I'm going to switch back over to, like, the mainland. So by this time, we got North Africa is taken over by the Allies. The bombing of Britain has ended, so now the Allies have this, and so also you got Germany being kicked back from Russia as well. So now Germany's on the defensive now, and so by the summer, July, so General Sir Arthur Harris, so he is going to be the one that oversaw the bombing of Germany from the Royal Air Force. He oversees Bomber Command, and he's going to be the one that goes over the night raids. While on the opposite end, the American 8th Army Air Force, who is commanded by General Ira Eaker, he's going to be the one that conducts day raids. And so this is going to be a very controversial point going forward, especially with how the raids are conducted. And so by this time, that's when you get a lot of these atrocities that start to happen, where people start to bomb not only military industrial complexes, but they also start to bomb neighborhoods, cities, places with no military significance, but the idea was to just cause so much destruction and so much damage that Germany has no way out but to surrender, just to save its own country, or save the country itself. And so they focus on Hamburg first. So I'm gonna, where's my markers? Oh, my markers. You're gonna love my lovely drawings all over again. What should I do? Red? Purple? Let's do purple. All right. So, Hamburg. Oh, where is it? Yeah. Okay, there we go. Luxembourg. All right. So, Hamburg. So some cities I want you to remember are these two. Hamburg. All right. Let's see how to spell it. All right. So, remember these. Oh, fuck. Alright, so, Hamburg's gonna be. Oh, oh, don't want to do that. Hamburg's gonna be the first one. Oh goodness. Okay, yeah, my G's pretty good, I guess. And so Hamburg's gonna be the first one. And so what they do is, first they, of course, they go in these individual flights, and most of those bombers are kind of staggered, but they're also at different elevations. And so when they go in, they have some. So the first wave, they go in with percussion bombs. So they're gonna go in, and once, actually, sorry. So they send in an initial wave, I believe, drops. I want to say flares. So these flares mark certain targets in the city. Then after that, another flight comes in, and then they drop percussion bombs. So these ones are the ones that just destroy the foundations for these houses. And then the third wave comes in, and then they all they drop incendiaries. Well, most of the foundations at this point are made of either concrete or wood. So that causes for a mess. So then this wood actually fuels the fire, and also the fire becomes so intense that it also starts to form its own atmosphere, and so it creates its own circulation of oxygen, and it literally sucks the air out of the of course out of the atmosphere, or the air we breathe. It sucks it out of our lungs essentially. And so by the time the British are done with this city, there's like 1,500-foot high flames. And so it's about 1,400 degrees, and the winds pick up to about 150 miles per hour. And about 20,000 people end up dying. And so I believe, I want to get a book about this. And so it sounds really morbid, but it would definitely be a very interesting book to read about the accounts of it. Because if you do look up certain accounts, you'll see accounts of people being going into these bunkers, into these bomb shelters, and they're literally cooked alive because of how intense the heat is. So by the time survivors go in, they open these doors, just literally liquid of like fat and blood come pouring out because they're literally cooked alive inside. You also got people who get stuck in the street because the tar on the road starts to melt, and it starts to get onto their shoes, and then they can't move, and then they're literally cooked where they stand. As well, you get people who die of asphyxiation because, like I said, it creates its own atmosphere and its own oxygen source, and so as they're running, it gets harder and harder to breathe because the fire is literally sucking the air out of their lungs. So they also die where they stand. It's completely brutal, and basically all this was done in suburbs and civilian areas. And so then in August of 43, they move on to Schweinfurt Regensburg. Oh, there you go. Schweinfurt Regensburg. And so that's going to be the second city. And so this is going to be conducted by B-17s with the 8th Army Air Force. And so about 203 civilians were killed, but 50% of the bombers ended up being damaged. This was all during the day. And so they ended up being shot down by BF-109s, BF-110s, or so by this point it'll be ME-109s and ME-110s and FW-190s. And so they now understand that during the day, that's when they lose the most aircraft, so they're going to have to do mostly night raids by this time. Alright, and so I'm going to go back to where I was in these notes. Oh, the cat's here. He wants to say hi to you guys. Howdy, meowdy partner. Oh. There we go. There we go. All right. Cool. All right. So, um, so by this time, this is towards the end of 40. Well, kind of towards like the fall of 43. After these bombings are conducted, U.S. shipping or U.S. production of ships stuck like at an all-time high. And so, by this time, the Kriegsmarine loses about 800 U-boats, and so it's pretty much on its last legs. Um, then Major General Karl Donitz at this point, he halts all production of U-boats, just due to the high casualties. But so I'm kind of going back and forth. But by this time, so this is about 43. About this time, he's still conducting the raids in the East Coast at this time. Also, it's towards the end of it. Actually, this is his last year. No, he's got one more year of it too. So by 43, November of 43, Rommel's back in France, and so he gets out of North Africa before the Allies can take him, and he gets back to France. And then now he's going to lead the construction of French defenses. So now they took over France, and so now he's going to try to lead construction along this western edge or northwestern edge of France, or yeah, the western edge of France. All right. So he creates this massive line of defenses with like minefields and barriers, and he wants to make sure no one can get into the French border. Super important strategist to understand or to know, or super important general to know. And then by this time, this is the Tehran Conference. Where's my marker? Oh, the cat's on top of the marker. Oh, no, it's not. So what the hell? Oh. Tehran Conference was conducted by Stalin, Churchill, and FDR. There we go. Cool. So there we go. I'm gonna send that to you guys just so you can see it. All right. So by this time, it's about November of 43. So November 43, Stalin's idea is to create a war on two fronts. And so they all agree that now that Stalin has him, so by 43, November 43. So by this time, he, I believe, has Germany on the pushback in Russia. And so now Stalin calls for Churchill and FDR to now push into France and Germany from the opposite end to squeeze them. And they agree to it. And so they come up with this plan. So Dwight D. Eisenhower jumps into the picture. And he now becomes the Supreme Allied Commander of the to the Allied landing forces by this point. So then there's now locations. Where do we land for this D-Day exercise? And so Slapton, he now creates this. So he now creates his battle plan, the strategy. They continue to not reinforce. They practice it. They practice landings and everything. And so by this time, Allied ships now fly, or planes now fly into France and start dropping supplies to French resistance groups in order to cause insurrection and kind of upset Germans' hold on France for a little, just to help with that. Now, this is where it kind of gets funny, actually. So the idea is to create a diversion. And yeah, so what they do is they create a ghost army. So this ghost army is literally just a bunch of balloons that are like shaped like tanks or barracks, army vehicles, planes, stuff like that. And so they set up this army along Calais, which is I believe just south, I want to say, of Normandy. And so they set up these balloons and everything, and now you got German reconnaissance aircraft taking pictures of this moving army. So each time that they take a picture, they come back, they let intelligence know that this is what we got. We got troops that are in the area. They're going to be moving towards us from this position, from Calais. Where's my... So this is how it goes. All right. All right. So two places, Calais and Pont du Hoc. And so here you go. All right. So Hitler believes that there's two places that the Allies can invade: Calais and Pont du Hoc. Well, Calais they can invade by land, but he doesn't know that that's not actually where they're going to go. Pont du Hoc, he said, because of the cliffs and everything, the only way that they can invade is only by air at Pont du Hoc. And so, he mentioned that the cliffs were too large for a full-scale invasion there. Well, he did not know that instead we were going to invade at Normandy. So here's where things kind of kick off. So we're on the final stretch, February 1944. RAF Bomber Command and the U.S. American 8th Air Force, or 8th Army Air Force, they start conducting bombing raids over German positions. All right. And so, they start conducting over German cities and the German Luftwaffe. They start shooting down these planes left and right. So I believe, what's it called? Masters of the Air. So Masters of the Air kind of follows this. So if you followed or watched Masters of the Air, about 75% of those men ended up losing their lives. So by the end of the war. And it's brutal fighting. I don't have a B-17, but hold on one moment. I got you guys. All right, guys. So, I got a B-25, and so this is the Doolittle paint scheme. But I'm going to use this, so just make believe that it's a B-17. So by this time, they're operating with B-17s over Germany. German tactics. So they usually use, by this time, the FW-190 and the BF-109. So I'm going to do the FW-190 first. So here's my FW-190. And so what they'll usually do is bombers are coming in. They're kind of pointed up here. And so what they'll do is they'll come around and they'll actually dive into them and then actually come in straight at them. And then they'll shoot towards the cockpit. That ensures that this plane no longer has a pilot and this plane now goes down. As well, you also have other planes. I'm going to switch to the BF-109. And so this one is going to be the Africa Corps paint scheme. So this one I believe is not Eric Hartman. It is Hans Joachim Hans Joachim. Oh man, Marseille. Yeah, Marcel. So his paint. This is his paint scheme right here. And so he wasn't at this battle, but basically these planes will now come in, and you do see sometimes you'll see them kind of like dive in and they'll shoot pretty much over here, and then they'll kind of like dive away. So they just keep doing that, and then of course they'll hit this plane, and then of course it goes down. So it takes a lot to bring down a bomber. But yeah, those are just kind of a few of the German tactics. And so you also got ramming tactics. You also have instances where I believe there's one instance, which you can find the pictures online too, where the I believe it is a BF-109 actually comes straight at the bomber, and then it actually misses and then clips the back part of the tail and literally shreds it apart. I mean, the bomber ended up staying up. Of course, this one did not. And so that was another instances where you do have ramming tactics, which was also employed by the Russians as well. All right, so enough of that. So now, this is where we kind of get to the meat and vegetables by May. May, what do you call that? Which part? Yeah. So you got this southern tip of Britain is now sectioned off. About a 10-mile stretch of land is sectioned off for civilians. And so this is where they're going to gather materials for the invasion. And so it's about a 10-mile strip along the British Channel, and basically all the supplies are going to be gathered there. This is by April, so May comes along. Southern Britain now becomes a site of about 25,000 troops. And then by this time, they're now practicing the landings. So then this employs the U.S., Britain, and Canada by this point. By the end of the month, that's when you got Allied ships then start to set sail across the channel to the French coast of Normandy. So it takes them that whole month. After the whole month, they're like, all right, we're good to go. Let's go, guys. Let's roll out. So then by June 1st, they now drop troops into France. Railway sabotage is in effect under the French resistance. They also have people who are radioing the U.S. with codes through a poem. So there's a poem. Actually, if I see it, I'm going to set these apart. Let's see if I can spell it. Oh. Let's sing lots. So they start sending these messages through a poem called, here you go, Les Sanglots Lords on De Violend or Le or El Automne. My French is really bad, so I apologize for anyone who is learning French or who is fluent in French. I completely butchered this, but this is going to be the poem that the U.S. sends codes through in order to kind of coordinate the attack. So then, two British mini subs. This is about June 2nd now, so we're about a few days away from the attack. Well, a couple days away from the attack itself. And so, British mini subs, they are launched ahead of the invasion force. And so, so now by this time, after they're sent away, warships start to carry out shore bombardments of any ports around Belfast, Clyde, and Scapa Flow. Alright, and so now the invasion starts. So now June 4th comes along, adverse weather. This was supposed to be the point where we do invade, but because of weather, we postpone it. Erwin Rommel actually leaves Normandy to go back to Germany, and then because his wife, I believe, has a birthday at that day. And so the wife's birthday is actually on the 6th. And so when he leaves, he goes back to celebrate it. He makes it just on time. But then by 9 p.m., as luck will have it, the forecast is saying that the weather will clear up in about a day and a half. So now, by June 5th comes along, the Allied convoys begin leaving the southern British port. They leave the port on the 5th. Sorry, not the 4th. And so Eisenhower meets with the 101st Infantry or Airborne. And so I believe is it Flag of Our Fathers? No. That is going to be 101st Airborne. Oh, shoot. Man. Why do I always do this? Flag of Our Fathers. Is it? Is it? It might be. Oh no. Why am I... The Pacific is going to be the Marines. No, it's going to be the Army. No, it is the Marines, yeah. Pacific is the Marines. Oh, shoot. Why am I doing this? Is it Flags of Our Fathers? No, it's not. Yeah, it is. Oh, shoot. No, it's not. Crap. Band of Brothers. That's the movie. Or the show. I apologize, guys. So, oh my gosh, that is so embarrassing. Because I've watched that show so many times. So, Band of Brothers is based on the 101st Airborne. And so, 2,300 of them are, they take off in C-47s. And so, I don't know if you guys have found or saw info on it, but the That's All Brother leads this paratrooper flight into Germany or France. And so, I believe that landed at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Museum. And so I got to get on the aircraft, and it was super cool. It was totally surreal experience, and so I definitely suggest heading out to the Air Force Museum, especially because I do work there part-time as well, but now, not this year because I'm in paramedic school, but it's a great place to go anyway. Otherwise, I'm going to get back to it. So now, June 6th, at midnight, the Allied fleet starts sailing across the channel. So then by this time, this is where I'm going to get to, actually. Well, hold this thought about their breakfast. So by this time, when they sail out, they're going to have an amazing breakfast. Eggs, bacon, sausage, pancakes, everything. Hold on to that thought. So now, in January, the Royal Air Force, their bombers go to the coastal batteries and they start carpet bombing everything in sight. To ease the landings on Utah Beach. So by 5:36 a.m., the USS Nevada, so that was the same one that was attacked at Pearl Harbor, is now at the Normandy invasion. So the USS Nevada starts firing on Utah Beach on the coastal guns, and so by 6:30 a.m., the troops then, so about an hour, then the troops land. They land on the beach, and the causeways ended up being flooded. And so to navigate this was kind of rough. And so they were able to kind of get through the German defenses and lay down suppressive fire. And so there's some brief instances of small arms fire here and there, but essentially it was about 2,500 of the airborne out of 6,600 ended up being casualties, and about 250 infantry ended up dying. So then, now we get to the main one, I believe the main one, Omaha Beach. 6:30 a.m. So 6:30 a.m. is when the landing starts. 5:50 a.m. The USS Arkansas and the USS Texas. So, also another cool thing. I should post a picture. I ended up going out to Galveston, Texas, and I ended up seeing the USS Texas. It is I want to say it is the world's last dreadnought, World War One dreadnought, or era dreadnought, still around. So the USS Texas was then implored into World War II, and so now it is going to be shelling Omaha Beach, and it's going to temporarily silence the gun batteries, just enough time for the men to make it onto the beach. Now, 60 tanks end up deploying to this beach first, but most of them end up actually sinking because they didn't realize that the tide actually started going up, so they end up sinking just shy of the beach. So then Allied bombers come in. They start dropping bombs left and right. About 3 miles inland, though, they missed the target. They're about 3 miles off. So now, these two things were a catastrophe for the troops. So then the troops were instructed to first take the east to western roads. I'm sorry. I'm going to put this down right here. All right. Let's see here. See if I can draw real quick. So it's not like Saving Private Ryan, actually. So how the batteries were actually positioned, so it kind of depends, because even though I have not been to this beach at all, but based on the times that I've seen from maps, all right. All right. There we go. So this is a really crappy job of drawing this out. And so the troops were instructed to take the east and western roads. And so by this time, the U.S. Rangers actually land on Pont du Hoc. And so then that's as far west as you can go. And from there, they're going to take out the German gun emplacements, firing on the Allied ships. And so basically, they're going to go out to the western side, and they're going to swing around here and try to take as many of these gun emplacements out as they can. Ooh, there you go. And so then the Rangers actually go further inland, and they actually remove some of those coastal guns. And so then they kind of relieve some of that pressure off of them. But the men on the beach, they now have to travel along 300 yards. Yards, yeah. That's bad. 300 yards of beach they have to travel across. With, what is that? Oh, yeah. As well, you have gun emplacements here firing in. You also have one firing here as well. And then you also have ones further inland firing out too. And these gun emplacements aren't just your Hitler's buzzsaw. I believe it's what MG the MG63. I want to say. Definitely help me out with that. I believe it is the MG63. But it's 3,000 yards. Sorry, it's 3,000 yards. So then 3,000 yards of beach they have to go across, and then before they can begin destroying these targets. So there's like sniper nests, machine gun emplacements, and then ultimately after they finally take it, so then now they have to destroy all this stuff. So the USS Texas ends up being radioed to continue shelling these targets further inland. So this is about 300, but then the Texas back here has to fire 3,000 yards inland. And so by around noon, 11 o'clock or noon, the men actually end up taking this beach. So it's about 6 hours worth of trying to get this beach. And so then the USS Texas actually ends up completely dominating this beach. And now we move on to Gold. So 7:25 a.m. is when Gold Beach is supposed to be invaded. And so now if I stand corrected, it's going to be I believe that's how it is. There you go. All right. So this is how it's all situated. I believe that's how it is, the order. So you have Utah on the far end. So Utah is captured. And then you got Omaha, which was captured around noon. So that is still ongoing by this time. Gold is being invaded around 7:25 a.m. They're supposed to land. About 3:35 a.m., the RAF come in. They start bombing coastal batteries and start doing ground attack strafing missions. And also, if you guys were wondering, I did make the Royal Air Force paint scheme for the Spitfire. So, little side note, the paint scheme, so the blue coloring right there, the paint code for it is only specific to Britain or to New England, or not New England, the United Kingdom. And so in the United States, you could find a paint scheme just a hair lighter or a hair darker, but you can't exactly find the exact paint code that plane used. So I think I ended up taking just a hint of light gray, mixed it with blue, and then I slowly started to get this like sky gray blue kind of color, which is exactly what they used. So then I used that for the paint scheme. That's probably my favorite scale model besides all the P40s that I have. Favorite scale model that I have made so far. Yeah. So, anyways, getting back to the point. 3:35 a.m. That's when the Royal Air Force bombs the coastal batteries, and then 5:30 a.m. that's when the warships start bombing Gold Beach, and then by 7, that's when the U.S. Sends in heavy bombers to carpet bomb over them, and so because of the cloud cover though, it's ineffective. So now we move on. Between 7 and 9, 7 and 9 a.m. that's when the British soldiers end up sustaining just a large amount of casualties from like German fire, and then eventually they end up taking the beach, but it takes a lot. Now, um, from there, the British are going to attack the German flank to the west. So now they're going to move west. From there, oh, sorry. From there. So now from there, they're going to move west across to Sword, well, to the back of Sword. And so now, by this time, they're going to attack like pillboxes back here, and then attack any other emplacements back there as well. And then by 8:45, they start capturing a lot of these strong points around this area. And then around like noon, that's when the tide starts to come in. So then that's when there's a huge backup on Gold Beach. Now, Sword, the Canadians, sorry, I can't leave out the Canadians. The Canadians end up pushing inland, and about 5 miles inland, that's where Gold Beach, anyone who land on Gold Beach, they end up pushing in 5 miles. And then now they have the Germans over here. They now have Sword Beach being invaded, but they also have allies to the back of them. And they also have the same thing on Juno as well. So now, Sword Beach. This is the site of where the paratroopers end up dropping about 1 o'clock in the morning. By 3:30 in the morning, that's when British bombers come in and they start laying waste to any encampments over there and strong points. And then by like 4:30 or 5, that's when you have your naval bombardment. Whew, there's a lot. So then you got the naval bombardment of by the HMS Warspite, and then also Ramillies. Yeah, the Ramillies. And then troops land about like 7 o'clock in the morning as well. And then there's like a narrow front. This beach is super narrow. And the Germans wait for them. So they wait till they get close to the beach, and then they lay waste to these Allied troops. The first wave suffers heavy casualties, and then no amount of support tanks and support waves of troops ends up helping them. So then about like 8 a.m., that's when the British troops, they just storm through the defenses. They just full on go through it. Try to get as much inland as they can. So then there's this place called Pegasus Bridge. They end up getting held up out there, but they made it inland at least. The German Panzer Division, by like 4 p.m. to 9, they end up actually coming to counterattack towards the coast. But then they're overwhelmed by the amount of British troops that they end up encountering. So they end up surrendering. All right. So then by this time, it's about 1,300 British casualties. It was insane. But ultimately, they take it. So now, I believe that was it. Yeah. All right. So now, the Allies are pushing inland. Where's this? So now, a little nerd session, especially with the USS Texas. And so, you guys don't need to remember any of this, and so disregard any of it. But just it's kind of cool to listen to. And so, the USS Texas, it leaves about after midnight to strike the German coastline. And so, after this strike, it goes back across the channel and then back to the French coast. So it goes back to back across the channel to rearm. It goes back to the French coast on June 11th, and then it continues shelling inland up until the 15th. So literally about 4 days worth of just bombing this coastline left and right. So I believe it's a super dreadnought, actually. There we go. So now, the Allies are so far inland that now the Texas risks actually hitting, hitting friendly forces. So now they have to figure out a way to stretch its its range. So initially they sail within about a few thousand yards of the island, or of the coastline. It can't go any further in, and so then they have to figure out another way to do it. So they are told that they have to fire at emplacements about 15 miles inland. It's about 26,000 yards, or no, it's about 36. No, it's about 26,000 yards, about rougher, give or take. So about 15 miles. And so to do this, they end up. Oh, let's see if I can draw this. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So here it is, about a 2 degrees. All right. So here it is. So I know it's not the best drawing ever, but basically was it sink? They flood. So they flood the torpedo blisters of the ship. So then now the ship now has about a 2 degree list. I know this is about a little bit more than 2 degrees. I'm sure it's like, what, 20, 30 probably. But in hindsight, this is 2 degrees. So 2 degrees list, and this allowed the ship to fire about 26,000 yards. Exactly. Now, the ship later on was requested to shell even further inland for necessary range. Now, Captain Charles A. Baker and the crew figured out a specific bombardment range from where they were anchored. So this was, and by doing so, they avoided shelling troop targets, what is it? Oh, sorry. So they figured out a way to range the targets. So instead of taking the coordinates that the troops sent out, so the troops were actually sending coordinates from the beach. Sorry, I'm gonna. So, target, troops, beach, Texas. There we go. All right. So, the troops were actually sending coordinates from the beach to the target. So they were ranging from there. But the USS Texas now had to account to figure out the true range from the beach to the ship. And so then they now have to calculate by doing the true range, they now were able to calculate the true range from the ship to the target. And so this, in theory, they were to achieve the maximum range. But due to the gun bore erosion, especially throughout the shelling itself, they now had to account for that as well. So then, this, the gun erosion actually went further back, beyond just the Normandy invasion. It actually goes back to North Africa when it was shelling the coastline in North Africa as well. And um, so to do this, they actually began the mission. It was to be either at the maximum high of the tide or the maximum low of the tide, where the currents were the lowest. So at 2 degrees, native to the horizon, actually. So they had to take it relative to the horizon. At 2 degrees, maximum range could be achieved. That could be maximum gun angle, which would be at like true 90 degrees. So no more, no less. That at true 90 degrees, they were able to do that. So now, the guns were able to achieve about 17 degrees. 17 degrees, which would be about like 26,000 yards. And so now the guns were trained at about 90 degrees, with a 2-degree list to starboard. Starboard. Now, that's kind of how things were situated. And so, true 90. So at true 90, it's about 17 degrees. I think. Yeah. So then, with just a 2-degree list, you can now train the guns instead of at 17. You're pretty much kicking them up straight up, basically. I believe that's how it is. Yes. Yeah. All right. So that's just kind of a little itty bitty thing right there. So now, June through December, the U.S. and the Allies are literally steamrolling through the east coast of Europe. And then by July, Canada and Britain, they end up taking Caen, Caen. All right. And then, by August, the Allies end up taking Paris. They storm into Paris and take about... they take a bunch. Well, the Soviets end up capturing Romania. Then the Slovaks begin their uprising within that area as well. And then the U.S. end up reaching the Siegfried Line. So then the Russians on the other end also capture Estonia. So they're just both steamrolling through. Germany's just losing territory left and right from the Russian side, and then also due to the bombing and the invasion of the France, they're also losing territory against the Allies as well. They're just being sandwiched in. At the same time, concentration camps end up being captured as well. Majdanek, so Majdanek, that ends up being captured and liberated by the Russian advance. And then after that, November comes along, the French, they end up reaching the Rhine River and capturing Strasbourg. So then, that's by November. Now, Battle of the Bulge. So the Battle of the Bulge happens now. December 16th, the U.S. reached the Ardennes River, or forest, sorry. They reached the Ardennes forest, and then the Germans start shelling this forest. And they bogged the Allies down there. So then by the 17th, about 81 Americans are captured, and they're taken to a village at Malmedy. The Malmedy village. So then the German infantry, as they're standing around, end up just opening fire on these people and completely killed all these POWs in cold blood. On the 22nd, just a few days later, the 101st, they end up being encircled by the Germans. And so actually, there's a funny story. So, actually, I'm going to write this down. All right. So, um, the 101st Airborne, after the artillery shelling, they end up actually being encircled. So General Anthony McAuliffe, I think that's how you say it, he actually receives a letter. So these two German ensigns or soldiers, they march over with a white flag and everything. So they come into the Allied encampment. And so they hand a letter over to they ask who the officer is, and so this guy kind of takes him to the officer, hands him the letter. And so the letter is essentially saying that you are encircled, you need to surrender and everything. And so McCabe, he's like half asleep by this point. He's just hanging out, he's taking a nap, he's being woken up by this guy who's like, hey, there's these two German soldiers here, they want us to surrender. And then, what do you want to say? And so then McAuliffe, he's like, surrender? What? Oh, nuts! So then, as he gets up to see the letter, he doesn't know what to say, and so the soldier's like, oh, well, just say nuts. And so then he's like, okay, I'll just put nuts down then, and then give the letter back to him. So he puts nuts down, gives it back to the German himself. He reads the letter, and then he's confused. He doesn't know what this means, and he's like, is this like sure, like, okay, nuts, we're okay, or like nuts, like, oh no, we're captured, or is this nuts as in a negative term? We I don't know. So the German soldier's genuinely confused. So now, the German soldier asks the officer, the American soldier, he's like, hey, what does this mean? And the officer's like, it's a no. So then the German is taken back to the end of the line, to the American line. And so the German soldier, or the German officer, is given the note, and all he reads is that, nuts. And so then he's also confused. So then he's asked to translate. So he goes back and he's asking them to like translate, what does this mean? And then Harper, who's the one that handed over the letter, he's like, basically, take a flying shit. And so then another one basically says, so he writes down a translation for it just to make sure he gets the message. And so he says, du kannst zu Teufel. I believe that's how you say it. Du kannst zu Teufel. So basically, you can go to hell. So then he sends them on their way. And Harper tells them if any German tries to attack, he'll kill every single last one of them. So then one of them ends up saying, good luck. And so then that's when the whole thing starts. Well, not the whole thing starts, but that's when shit kind of pops off from there. So now, the 23rd, on the 23rd, Allied strikes commence, and just to clear up any of the German entrenchments. And then by 25th, General Patton comes along, and then he reinforces the 101st with his tank division. So then the Germans, as they're trying to push in towards the Americans, and when the Americans receive that aid, they lose momentum, and then, so they lose momentum. Let's see how I draw this. Oh, I need another marker. Oh. Well. So the Allies, they're encircled here. By the Germans. so they're encircled within this is horribly mapped out. This is not how it's probably it looks, but just for ease of learning, essentially, they're basically surrounded by the Germans. Patton comes in, and Patton comes in and he pushes out a German army, and then he reinforces the Allies, and then he starts pushing the Germans out. So now, what you get is essentially I'm just gonna, yeah. You get a bulge, Battle of the Bulge. That's how they get that term. And so, oh, what in the heck? Okay. All right. So now, by the 3rd of January, the Germans are pushed back to about the U.S. lines at the Ardennes Forest. And by the 7th, Hitler ends up recalling all Germans to fall back to the German border to reinforce Germany. And so by this time, the U.S. ends the siege at Bastogne. And so this is where essentially this is all going on, about on the 20th. And then the Russians end up pushing into Budapest by that point too. And then by 45, the U.S. is basically driving Germany back out of France. So now they're at the German border, essentially. And so now by January, the Russians also end up liberating Auschwitz by that point. So you guys just make note of that as well, because after this, I'm going to be going over, well, not after this lecture, but after World War II, I'm going to do one lecture on the Holocaust and genocide, just because I know it's not a curriculum, or it's not a lesson that a whole lot of people learn about now. So I want to actually educate you guys on that. But just make note that January of 1945, Russians actually liberate Auschwitz death camp. So then, another one, Dresden. So Dresden's another firebombing. Bomber Command Harris, he goes in with the 8th Army, they bomb Dresden. It's another firestorm, about 30,000 casualties. So then, by March, the U.S., they stop short of the Elbe River to outside Berlin. Now, this is kind of a controversy, because the Americans could have taken Germany by this point. They could have stormed Germany, and by this time as well, because the Russians are super pissed off that Germany attacked Russia, now Russia's hell-bent on destroying everything that Germany has to offer. Literally the name itself. They want it wiped off from the map. So now, what does the U.S. do? Does the U.S. take it over? Or, because of the amount of casualties and death that Germany has caused, is this a rightful punishment for them? What do they do? So, what they do is they stop short of the Elbe River, right outside Berlin, and Dwight D. Eisenhower actually believed that it would be a strategic advantage for the Soviets to then move in and take Berlin, because British and Americans, they had to reestablish forces while the Soviets were actually closer. So, I believe by this point as well, let's face it, FDR has passed away. He never made it to the end of the war. Now, Truman, on the other hand, he takes office, but Truman, he wanted to define demarcation. And so the demarcation line. So basically, this is a line that divides Berlin in half. And so he wants to define that line between the US and the Soviets. So now, Berlin was within the Soviet boundaries. Now, since the Soviets, they ended up capturing the the older river, that was actually technically closer to Berlin. So he was understanding that Russia would take Berlin. Now, by April, Germany is scared. Everyone inside Germany is scared that Russia is moving into Berlin. So now there's this mass suicide inside of Germany. About 7,000 suicides within Berlin alone. Men, women, children, families, officers, infantry, anyone you could think of. They shoot themselves, hang themselves, take cyanide capsules. You literally have people dead on benches in the streets. It's insane. Now, there's this book called Inferno by Max Hastings. It's a huge book, but I definitely recommend you guys to read it, as well as Red Phoenix Rising. So the Red Phoenix Rising, that documents the Russian kind of industrial revolution, or like the revamp of the industrial or the military complex within Russia between the beginning of Operation Barbarossa and then by the end of it, or by the end of the war, and how Russia kind of went from this like basically piss poor military complex to one of the strongest military powers of this war. Inferno by Max Hastings, that is basically a giant culmination of memoirs that Max Hastings put together. Beautiful writer. He's amazing at what he does. He blends all these stories together to create this massive basically narrative of the European war and the Russian invasion of Germany, and how it wasn't a strategic invasion. It was straight up just mass murder, rape, and killing, and it was atrocious. And he points out parts of the story where where the hell? Oh. He points out parts of the story where basically these Russian soldiers would go in and they would murder packs of just children. Tanks would roll over cars with people in it. And Germans on the other side, they would come in and so you got Russian aircraft that would come in, and school buses full of children, German children, trying to get out of Germany. These planes would actually come in and strafe them and completely riddle that whole bus full of children with bullets. It was basically a shoot on sight kind of thing during the Russian invasion, and Max Hastings paints an amazing picture of that. So I definitely suggest that book. It's huge, it's long, but I assure you, it's an amazing read. Now back to it. Essentially, there's a German historian, what was it, Florian Huber. So he basically talks about how it's essentially, there's a book called, I think, Promise Me You'll Shoot Yourself. So he documents this mass suicide through that book. And then definitely that's it's a sort of a drier read, but it's still very informative about what it was like at that time. So then by the 15th, April 15th, Bergen-Belsen, that was another concentration camp. The British end up liberating it. Then by the 16th, the day after, the Soviets push into Berlin. So now the Battle of Berlin starts from the eastern and the southern side. So now... Alright, so now Russia's pushing in from both sides. The U.S., they're pretty much holding out right outside the border. So now, between 200 to 300,000 civilians end up dying in this battle. So then basically within this like invasion, there's just mass killing. It's going room to room, house to house, just clearing house. Anyone who moves that's German, they're basically dead. And so now they push into, oh gosh, by this time, I believe it takes them about like, what was it? What am I doing? Just me. Ah, gotcha. Okay. Where's the eraser? All right. So I'll just use a blue. Yeah. All right. So their objective is to get to the Reichstag. So that is basically where the capital of Nazi Germany will be. Well, within Berlin. And basically the U.S. and the Russians, they end up meeting up at the Elbe River. And the Elbe River essentially runs right through it, officially dividing Berlin in half. So, by this time now it's the 29th, and the U.S. forces end up marching into Dachau, liberation camp, or concentration camp. And Hitler then signs the final will and testament saying that, okay, I want this person to be chancellor, I want that. He also marries Eva Braun. They don't, I think, and then they also murder themselves or kill themselves that day. They end up, I believe, they both take cyanide, but I believe Hitler is the one that shoots himself in the head also. And then he wants his body to be burned, and so they're not to be captured. So then, by the 30th, after the Soviets have entered Berlin and started fighting and everything, it's basically room to room. And so, just massive killing and everything, and they're trying to hold out the city. Men and children, who are just civilians, they end up actually being conscripted into this army. And so, by the second, the last of the Berlin defenders are held up in the Reichstag, and they are all killed off. And then essentially, the rest of them just surrender. The Soviets put their flag on the Reichstag, and then there you go. Germany signs unconditional surrender on the 7th, and then on the 8th it's considered VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. The Allies now have control of Europe. There you go. So about an hour and a half on the dot. Well, hour and 28 minutes, but I got 2 minutes left, I guess. So now after this, that's when I'm going to go back into the Pacific Theater. So this one's going to encompass both the atomic bomb and also how things kind of move along into the 50s and 60s. So we got one more class on World War II. I kind of mixed up the dates on the Battle of Berlin, but essentially April 30th. April 30th, Hitler kills himself. But then on the and then on the 1st of May, that's when Goebbels commits suicide, and then also Donitz ends up, I think he might have surrendered. No, he remains Reich's president of Nazi Germany for a little while longer, especially after the Russians capture the Reichstag. But then later on, about like 2 weeks later, he ends up being taken, and then he is put into the Nuremberg trials. He's found guilty of, I believe, war crimes, but then not crimes against humanity, and one other thing. But then he's sentenced to 10 years in prison, and I believe he ends up dying in, I want to say 1980. At the age of he was in his 80s by that time as well. So yeah, so that's basically it, and for Germany at least. And so yeah, I'm gonna switch over to the Japanese side after that, and then we'll go from there. But essentially, I'm glad you guys are bearing with me. It's so much information, and that's why I have my notes down, just because there is just so much information I want to talk about. It's cool stuff to me at least. So I try to make it fun and everything, especially with my scale models, and kind of show you how things work and how the formations and battle tactics, how that all works out, and especially with my trusty whiteboard and my amazing drawings. But yeah, but essentially that's that for the European theater. I will talk about. So I know some of you wanted me to go into, of course, the Waffen SS and stuff like that. I will go into that after the Japanese after the talking about the surrender of the Imperial Japanese Empire. I will talk about the Holocaust, genocide, and all of these kind of like atrocities in World War II, and how that goes moving forward. All right, and so otherwise, that's that. Take care, guys. I will hopefully have another lecture up by either the middle or the end of the week, going into this next weekend. Otherwise, if you have any questions for me, let me know, and then I'm going to try and get some sleep, because it's been a long day, it's been a long week, and I got to go back to work tomorrow. So, yeah, take care, guys. Enjoy your weekend. And also, I believe next week is going to be spring break. So I will try to get that lecture out actually earlier. So then you'll have it over spring break. And I will probably have an extra credit assignment for anyone who wants to do it. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But it's just something that I figured it'll be fun, or hopefully you guys will find interest in it. And so, otherwise, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to get going. And otherwise, if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know throughout the week. All right? Take care, guys.